I mean, I know they would be discriminatory against, murderers and, convicted rapists, but what other than that is the basis for this discrimination?
There's feeling from some that if you have any kind of criminal background that you won't be able to drive. Say if you were 18 years old and you had a minor drug offense.
Well, no, I just looked at the Uber conditions. They say even certain felony offenses will be permitted. They don't even mention misdemeanors. And they say, they list certain driving offenses. So why wouldn't they really want to know about that stuff as opposed to conducting a fake, insufficient background check just by name basis?
I cannot answer that for them, but I can just tell you that the thing about discrimination is really more of a myth.
Right.
Just by having some sort of offense in your background is not going to necessarily prohibit you from driving for any company.
They set the conditions, and I just looked because they said, how can I become an Uber driver? I just looked at the list of conditions and say certain felonies are allowed, and I'm okay with non-violent. I'm okay, yeah, that's fine. So they set those conditions, but they specifically exclude murderers and sexual predators, who they approved in Eugene, Oregon, with their background check. Now, did they really spend $10 million in one city to oppose fingerprint-based background? That can't be.
That's got
to be inaccurate.
No, that is actually
How do we know that number?
Because that comes from the folks back in those communities who were tracking it, both on the labor side and on the business side.
$10 million. I just figured out if a background check costs $60, fingerprint-based, that would be 170,000 or so background checks. How many Uber drivers do they have down there? 1 million?
A lot.
So I mean, this is incredible. I'm so angry that they wouldn't show up today, but thank you. I learned in the first hearing, and I went online, that I could be a fake Lyft driver tomorrow for $8.99 with Prime delivered.
Yeah.
And I learned from you that GSA is soliciting these people, yet we're going to put public employees into systems where the workers are being abused, as has been talked about here. Some people earning as little as less than $4 an hour after expenses, and where their safety could be at risk. We can deal with that.
Well, what makes this even worse, Mr. Chairman, is that I gave Mr. Smith an article that comes from Uber drivers themselves who are taunting and saying that you don't even need to get a background check. Here's how you cheat the system by doing that. It's just flaunting it. And again, in their
I would love to have that document.
I will get that to you.
Committee's been through things like this before, drug testing and alcohol testing for truck drivers with things called whizinators to get around the system. We've been down this. I would love to have that document.
I will get that to you right after this hearing.
Mr. Chairman, you pointed it out. This committee has mandated background checks for transportation workers across the board, including truck drivers that happen to need a hazmat endorsement, have to get a fingerprint background check that, quite frankly, is pretty extensive. So I think there is, significant, precedent here, and you've done this for, again, other areas in the transportation space.
And we have certain rules. I can't remember with truck drivers, but I know with longshore people, we've set the standards on what past offenses and what time lapse. But we're not saying, gee, if you ever had a felony, you can't do this. But
and there's a waiver process that we fought very hard for to make sure that even if you did commit an offense, you have an ability to demonstrate that you're not a security, in this case, a safety risk, that may allow you to still work in that profession. So there are some due process protections built into that.
And the government also does require drivers who drop things off at military bases and other secure facilities to require their drivers to be fingerprint background checked as well, and they do it as a cost of business.
And okay, I think we've covered that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for laying out that almost everybody else who drives the public has to have fingerprints and a background check except